Hey guys, it's Miss Ortiz,
Miss Santana,
and Miss Fonseca.
and we're here to give you all some test-taking strategies for your STAAR, which you will be taking tomorrow, May 2nd. Right, we're going to start with going over, that's Miss Santana.
Sorry.
We're going to start with going over a few things that you're going to see on your test booklet. Well, actually, first we'll start with how long you have to take your STAAR test on Tuesday. So you're going to be given 4 hours to take your test. Please use your time wisely. Okay, well, now we're going to go over what's going to be on your test booklet. So you're going to have 49 multiple choice questions. You'll have 5 griddable. And that's going to give you a total of 54 questions. Now, you're also going to have a few questions that are going to be considered field test questions. Now, we don't know which ones those are, so we do want you all to try your best on every single question. Okay, as far as we know, as of right now, you need about 22 questions correct to pass. We do want you to aim for about 25, just to be on the safe side. For commended, you need 42 questions correct to get that level 3 commended. Okay. Next, we're going to go over a few statements that your teachers in your testing rooms can say, and these are the only things that they can say to you during your test. So if you do have questions, these are the 2 responses that you're going to hear. So the first one's going to say, they're going to say, "I can't answer that for you, just do the best you can." Another statement that they may say to you when you turn your test in with your answer document is, "You have not recorded your answer on the answer document. Please go back and mark your answers on it now." Okay, they're trying to tell you something. Since this is all that they can say, especially that second statement, they're trying to tell you that maybe you forgot to bubble in an answer, maybe you didn't erase correctly, maybe your answers aren't bubbled in dark enough. So just go ahead and double check your answer document. Okay. Still, on your test booklet, you're going to be given a formula chart. It's going to have some important formulas that we've used throughout the year. You're also going to be given a graph paper, so you can graph some things. Now, you definitely have your calculator to graph, but just in case you would prefer to graph by hand. Highlighter and scratch paper, you have to ask for those at the start of the test. So be sure that you ask your teacher for a highlighter or scratch paper. Okay. Next, we're going to go off to something really, really important that I know you guys have struggled on throughout the year. These are your griddable questions. Okay, these are the ones that are not multiple choice questions. Okay, so let's go ahead and go down to that. Okay, these are your griddable questions for your STAAR. Now remember, we said that there was going to be 5 griddable questions, okay, on your STAAR. So let's just go through each bullet. So the first one says the correct answer can be a positive or negative number. Okay, if the answer is a negative number, you must enter a negative sign. Okay, if no sign is marked, then your answer will be defaulted to a positive number. Okay, guys, so please make sure you bubble in that negative if your answer is negative. Okay, the answer grid includes a floating decimal point, meaning that you can put that decimal point on any one of the little bubbles there, any one of those little slots. Okay, so if the answer is a decimal number, you must enter a decimal point. Okay, so be sure that you bubble in that decimal point. Okay, they're not going to know if it's a decimal if you don't put that decimal point in there. Okay, and Ms. Santana is showing you an example of a possible answer. Okay, that's how the answer would have been bubbled in. There's your negative, the 2, your decimal, and then your 4. Okay, you must enter your answer in the boxes and then fill in the corresponding bubbles. Okay, just as Ms. Santana just showed you. You do not have to use all the boxes, so notice how there are still a few boxes that weren't used. That is perfectly fine. And you can place your answer in any set of consecutive boxes. So notice how Ms. Santana bubbled in her answer right in the center. That is going to be correct. You can either put it at the beginning, so she's going to show you an example there. Okay, so there's another example right at the beginning. Notice how they're consecutive boxes, one right after the other. At the very end. Okay, so those are three different ways that you could bubble in your answer. All three of those would be correct, as long as they are in consecutive boxes, meaning they're one right after the other. Okay. Last one, extra zeros may be filled in, either before or after the answer, as long as their placement does not affect the value, and I think that's cut off a little bit there. But as long as you don't change your answer, those zeros don't affect your answer, that's perfectly fine. You can also enter those zeros there as well. Okay, so those zeros at the front of it do not affect those your answer. It's still considered negative 2.4.
All right, so now we're moving on to the last part of the test-taking strategies, which is the calculator. There will be extra calculators given in each hallway to the hallway monitors outside. When you're testing in your classroom, there will be some people outside monitoring the bathrooms in the hallways, and they will have a bin with extra calculators. So please rest assured that if something happens to your calculator, you can ask your teacher that's in the room to go ahead and that you would like another calculator. Maybe your calculator died, so you definitely want to ask if it dies. Maybe your calculator froze on you. You know, these things happen. They are, you know, they're technical issues. So make sure that you talk to your teacher that's there. If anything arises, please don't be afraid to ask for help. If you feel sick, you know, ask to go outside or go to the nurse, or if you need to go to the restroom, it's emergency, whatever. I mean, so please make sure that you ask the teacher for anything that might arise that you're not sure about, okay? If they can answer you, they will answer you. If they can help you, they will help you, okay? Now, let's see. One of the things on the calculator we want to make sure that you do remember is obviously Control-N, because when you get your calculators, they will be cleared out, but as you're working on them and you're inputting information, you might have tabs open, and so what you want to do to clear them out, remember, is Control-N, and then it says, do you want to save? Just click No, and then you can go back to what you're doing, and you can see that it does clear out the tabs. So that's one of the things we want to make sure you remember for the exam. Another thing that we want to make sure that you remember for the exam, give me a second here, is relations. Don't forget that you do have the option of using relations anytime you want during the test when you're graphing. So when you go to the Graph app and you need to graph an equation, if you're not sure if you can use relations, you can use it no matter what. Now the only problem with relations is if you do want a table, like let me go ahead and try one here. Let's see, let's do y equals 2x plus 3. If you do use relations and then want a table, it will not show you a table. So Control-T, it will tell you that it's not possible. Now you can still put up the grid, so if you needed to maybe look at points here, or you could even do menu 5-1 and get the points that way. Instead of from a table, you're now getting them you know, individually. So it's still possible to look at those points. Okay. Now if you want the grid up, remember you go to Menu, go to View, go to Grid, look for the keyword Grid, and then go to Line Grid. And you can also, you know, look at the points that way. Alright, so another thing that we need to talk about is the store key. So we're going to go over how to use the store key. Remember that there are certain numbers you want to use. Those numbers start with 3, I believe, and it goes 5, 7, 9, ... You do want to use these numbers too. So like let's say you have one variable and it's an x, then you go ahead and use the 3 for that x. Let's say you have two variables, an x and a y, you want to use a 3 and a 5. And let's say you have a z also, okay, use a 7 for the z, okay. Things you need to remember also is if you are going to use the store option, so let's go, you are going to need to use the first calculator option. So let's say you store 3 control variable for your x, and then maybe you had 2 variables, so 5 control store y, hit enter, and now you're going to type in an expression that they've given you. Okay, well let's say that you have 2 variables right next to each other as 2xy plus 3. Let's say you have to enter that. When you hit enter, it will give you this message, variable is not defined, no values assigned to variable. So basically what you need to understand is that you do need a multiplication sign right here between your x and y, and then it'll go ahead and give you the correct amount. So let's try that again, 2x times y, so we're putting a multiplication sign between the two variables, and then plus 3. And there you go, you got 33. Another reason you would need that multiplication symbol is you have maybe distributive property in the expression. For instance, you have 2x being multiplied with, for instance, y plus 2. Again, name is not valid. They don't understand this. The calculator does not understand this part right here. Doesn't understand you wanted to multiply 2x times y, 2x times 2. So try retyping it and put that multiplication symbol in between this variable right here and that set of parentheses. So let's see, we've got y plus 2. There we go. Okay, so just a little tip for your store. Please don't forget that. I know sometimes you forget these things, but, you know, take a deep breath when you get messages like that and go back and kind of think about what we've told you before. The key is put those multiplication signs in there, okay? All right, Ms. Fonseca, you want to talk about the numerical solve?
Okay, so numerical solve, my students, at least you've seen it as, how many equal signs do we have? When we have one equal sign, menu. What class are we in? We are in algebra class. How many equal signs did I have? 1, numerical solve. All we have to do now is copy in our equation. Now this is very important. The calculator will do all the work that you need. However, there's one thing that you cannot forget. So we're going to go ahead and type it in. It's telling me something is missing. One or more arguments is missing. I forgot to tell the calculator what I want them to find. All you have to remember here is comma x. Now, the variable might change. If they use n, you use the letter n. Whatever letter you type in is what you put after the comma. And that's it.
Let's try one with 2n. 2n minus 6 equals 8. We're going to put that comma, and instead of an x, make sure you use the variable in the equation. So put your n. There you go. All right. Let's see what else we got here, guys. Things that we want you to remember. So again, the main thing here was don't forget the comma and the variable. So before you get frustrated or you ask for another calculator, make sure that you think about it, take a deep breath, think about the things we've told you not to forget, and these are the main two things. Don't forget those multiplication signs when using STAAR. Don't forget the comma and variable when using numerical solve, which is menu 31. Okay. All right, Ms. Ortiz is going to go ahead and follow up with some other things we would like for you to do as soon as you can begin the test.
Okay, so these are just a few things that we definitely want you to write down either on your formula chart, maybe on the graph paper that you're going to get, or on a scratch sheet of paper. Definitely not on your Scantron, okay, or on the front of your test booklet. Okay, maybe on the inside of it, but definitely not on your Scantron. Okay, so maybe you might want to ask for that scratch sheet of paper at the beginning before you take your test. That way you can write down any extra notes that you may need. Okay, so we're going to start with the slope guy. Right, so go ahead and draw out his face as soon as you're able to start your test. Okay, and somewhere on that scratch sheet of paper, go ahead and draw out your slope guy. Okay, you have his two eyes there. His eyebrows. We're going to draw in his eyes. So we have the plus, that is a positive slope. We have a minus for a negative slope. We have his nose with the U right under it, his little nose. His nose represents undefined. That's what that U represents, undefined. Okay, then we have his mouth, and we have some freckles or some dimples right at the end. That is a 0. That represents 0, and that is a 0 slope. Okay, so there's your slope guy. There's his face. That's going to help you to remember your slopes. Now, you can also use menu 833 to help you find those slopes, but you definitely want to draw your slope guy. Okay, that's going to help you with the 4 different types of slopes.
You can also use spreadsheets.
Also, yes, definitely. Also, spreadsheet. Remember that M represents slope for a linear function, linear equation. Y equals mx plus b. Your m is your slope. Okay, plenty of ways that you can find slope.
And all of these are things you can write down. As soon as they tell you can begin, you open your booklet, go to question 1, or go to the formula chart, go to the graph paper, scratch paper, and write this stuff down so that you don't panic and forget during the test.
Yes, anything that comes to mind as soon as you get that test, write it down. And along the way, if something comes to you and it's not part of the question that you're working on, just go ahead and write it down. That way you don't forget it for future questions or future reference if you have to use it.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and go to Vux-Hoy. This is something that we have taught you to remember the vertical and horizontal lines. And so here are some things that you want to jot down again. You can jot down Vux-Hoy. Vux stands for V is for vertical line. This is referring to a vertical line.
Which is the nose on the slope
guy.
guy.
This guy right here. So I'm going to draw him over here on the side, and you can draw him. There's your vertical line. The U, remember the U in the nose, which represents the word undefined, and that means he has an undefined slope. So if they ask you for slope, that's what that U means. The X is the equation that vertical line starts with. It's X equals, and then you'll have to look for a number. I'll give you an example on the calculator. I'll show you an example on the graph app. So if you're going to graph a vertical line, you would have to use relations because it begins with an X and not a Y. So X equals, and then let's say it equals to 3. So what you're going to see is a vertical line that goes exactly right through 3 on the X-axis. So there's your equation for that vertical line. Okay. So the next example here is HOY, or the next 3 letters. H stands for horizontal line, and that would be the mouth on slope guy. So if you look at the mouth here, that's a horizontal line, so it looks flat. So since it's flat, it does have a 0, that's what this represents, 0 slope. And then the equation begins, instead of with an X equals, it's the opposite because it's going to go through the Y-axis, so Y equals and then a number. So again, I can show you an example of that on the graph. I'm going to go ahead and go to delete relations, even though it starts with the Y, just so you can kind of see Y equals 3, and now you're going to see a horizontal line that goes right through the Y-axis at 3, okay? So please remember that. It's very important because you don't want to miss a question that simple, okay? All right, so here's the next one Ms. Ortiz is going to explain.
Okay, we're going to go on to Xerox. Now I know Ms. Santana, Ms. Fonseca, and myself in our classes, we've gone over what Xerox represents. So we're going to start with the ZE, and this is for quadratic function. So the ZE represents zeros. Okay, our next 2 letters, RO, that represents roots. The X, which is the one that's you guys should know and have probably seen the most, is X-intercept, which is where the graph crosses the X-axis. X-intercept, X-axis.
Go ahead and draw one. I'll see if I can draw one here. We got a quadratic right here and right here. There's your X-axis.
And remember that a quadratic can have either 2 X-intercepts, 1 X-intercept, or none. Those are your 3 different options. Okay? 2, 1, or none. So Ms. Santana is drawing a quadratic that has 1 X-intercept. The first one she drew had 2. You have those 2 arrows there. And the last one that she's drawing is one that does not have any X-intercept. So there are no zeros, no roots, no X-intercept, no solution. Okay, 2 and 1. And so that S at the end represents solution, or solutions, depending on how many you have. Okay, so those are the 4 words. They all represent the same thing. They all represent where the graph crosses the X-axis. So zeros, roots, X-intercepts, and solutions. So that's our Xerox.
And the calculator refers to them as, let's go ahead and graph a quadratic here. Give you an example. Let me zoom out of that one. Don't forget the zoom key or zoom fits. Both of those would work for this one. If you notice on this, it does not cross the X-axis. Now when you want to find it in the calculator, you can go to menu, go to 6, and go to number 1. click and drag, and you'll see no 0 found. So even the calculator knows that there is no solution for this, okay? Now I can show you an example of one that does have a solution, just so you can kind of see one that does. Let's do a -3, okay? This one happens to have 2. So again, go to menu, go to 6, go to 0, click and drag. Do it again, you've got 2 of them. Click and drag, and there's your 2 zeros. There's one there and one there, okay? Another way you could do this is menu 5-1. So those of you who forget that, hey, try the trace key, because remember, you can trace up and down that graph. So there's one of your zeros there. You can also see the y-intercept and the other 0. Okay, so menu 5-1 or menu 6-1 for those zeros. So if they ask you for one of these, that's what you need to remember, is use that menu 6-1 or 5-1.
And just like Ms. Santana is mentioning some calculator steps along the way that we're figuring out that we can use. When you are taking your test, if you remember any calculator functions and you want to write them down just so you can use them for, again, for future reference on future problems. That way, if you do come across a question that you're stuck on, maybe you can try all the ones that you've already wrote down and use maybe process of elimination and see which one will work for you and get you that correct answer. You don't want to just guess on those answers, guys. You want to try all your options, all those calculator functions that we've taught you.
Now, another thing we wanted to talk about was, this is what I tell my students, how they can remember. There's 2 words that mean the same thing also. Just like here, 4 words mean the same thing. Rock the slopes. And rock the slopes is going to remind you of rate of change. Rate of change is the same as slope. So when they're asking you for rate of change, they are really just asking you for slope. On your calculator, don't forget that if you have a linear function that you have graphed in the calculator, for instance, that one right there, and you want the slope of that, you can do menu 8-3-3. So look for the keywords, you click on the graph, there's your slope, or rate of change. So rock the slopes, guys, remember that. Then last but not least, we have domain and range, independent and dependent. That's what Dr. Id is going to remind you of. You can basically just create a T-chart and put doctor up here at the top, and then maybe id right at the very next row or at the bottom. And basically what this reminds you of is domain are your X numbers, range, which are your Y numbers, and then the I and D stand for independent. I'm going to go ahead and abbreviate that one, and then dependent. So if they use these vocabulary words, at least you have somewhat of an idea of what they're talking about. So when they ask you for domain, that means they want the X values. If they're asking you for range, they want the Y values. Alright, so I guess that's it. Those are all the test-taking strategies we have for you. Very last but not least is my favorite. I came up with this year, and I'm really happy, and I've been trying to get everybody to say it, and I say it almost every day in my classes. Those of you who went to math camp, you probably heard me say it. When in doubt, graph it out. So good luck, guys. We hope